The morning sun cast long shadows across the parade ground at Buckingham Palace, as Sergeant Michael Rodriguez adjusted his dress blue uniform for the final time. The United States Marine had traveled over 4,000 miles for this moment, representing his country in a joint ceremonial exchange that would bring together two of the world's most elite military forces. His polished brass buttons gleamed in the London sunlight, each one reflecting years of dedication and service that had brought him to this prestigious assignment. Across the courtyard, Lance Corporal James Wellington of the Queen's Guard stood, motionless at his post, his iconic red tunic and bearskin hat making him appear like a living statue. The British soldier had been selected from hundreds of candidates for his unwavering discipline and perfect record of service. His family had served the crown for 3 generations, and today he would uphold that tradition in front of an international audience that included military dignitaries, diplomats, and curious tourists who had gathered to witness this rare ceremonial meeting. The event had been planned for months as part of a cultural exchange program designed to strengthen the bond between American and British forces. Military officials from both nations had carefully choreographed every detail, from the precise timing of movements to the specific protocols that would govern the interaction between the two soldiers. The ceremony was meant to showcase the professionalism and mutual respect shared by Allied forces, demonstrating to the world the unity that existed between these longtime partners. Rodriguez had spent weeks preparing for this moment, studying British military customs and practicing the intricate drill movements that would be required. His commanding officers had briefed him extensively on the significance of the event and the importance of representing American military values with honor and precision. The Marine had served 2 tours in Afghanistan and 1 in Iraq, earning commendations for his leadership and bravery under fire, but nothing in his combat experience had prepared him for the unique pressure of this ceremonial duty. Wellington, meanwhile, had been standing guard for over 2 hours, maintaining the perfect stillness that was the hallmark of the Queen's Guard. Tourists had attempted to distract him with jokes, photos, and even deliberate provocations, but he remained as unmovable as the ancient stones of the palace itself. His training had taught him to ignore all external distractions, to focus solely on his duty and maintain the dignity of his position, regardless of what occurred around him. The crowd began to grow larger as word spread through social media that something special was about to happen. Smartphones emerged from pockets and purses as spectators positioned themselves for the best possible view of the proceedings. Military historians and veterans in the crowd recognized the significance of what they were about to witness, while others were simply drawn by curiosity and the promise of witnessing a unique moment in military tradition. As the appointed hour approached, both soldiers could feel the weight of expectation settling over the parade ground like a heavy blanket. The formal ceremony was scheduled to begin with a specific sequence of movements, each one laden with symbolic meaning and historical significance. Rodriguez would approach Wellington's position with measured steps, following protocols that had been refined over centuries of military tradition. The Marine began his approach, his boots clicking against the ancient stones with mechanical precision. Each step was calculated and deliberate, reflecting the discipline that had been drilled into him through years of training and service. The distance between the 2 soldiers decreased slowly, creating a tension that seemed to electrify the air around them. Wellington remained perfectly still, his eyes fixed straight ahead as military protocol demanded. He could hear the approaching footsteps but gave no outward sign of acknowledgement, maintaining the stoic composure that had made the Queen's Guard legendary around the world. The challenge before him was to remain completely motionless while acknowledging the American Marine, according to the precise ceremonial requirements that governed such interactions. The crowd fell silent as they sensed something extraordinary was about to unfold. The usual chatter and camera clicks faded to nothing as hundreds of eyes focused on the 2 soldiers, each representing their nation's finest military traditions. The moment stretched endlessly, filled with anticipation and the promise of witnessing something that would be remembered and shared for years to come. Rodriguez came to a halt exactly 3 feet from Wellington's position, the distance specified in the ceremonial protocols that had been meticulously planned for this encounter. The Marine's breathing was controlled and steady, his years of training allowing him to manage the adrenaline that coursed through his veins. He could see the intricate details of Wellington's uniform up close now, the precise stitching and immaculate maintenance that spoke to the British soldier's dedication to his craft. The Royal Guard's eyes remained fixed on a point somewhere beyond, the horizon, following the ancient tradition that forbade acknowledging distractions or breaking his stoic pose. Wellington had been trained from his first day of service to treat his duty as sacred, to become a living embodiment of British military excellence that could not be swayed by external pressures or unusual circumstances. His breathing was so controlled that his chest barely moved, creating an almost supernatural stillness that captivated the growing crowd. Spectators pressed closer to the barriers that separated them from the soldiers, their phones held high to capture what they sensed was becoming an extraordinary moment. A group of American tourists recognized Rodriguez's uniform and began whispering excitedly about the significance of having their country represented in such a prestigious setting. British onlookers felt a surge of national pride as they watched Wellington maintain his perfect composure, despite the unusual circumstances developing around him. The Marine began the first phase of the ceremonial salute, raising his right hand with the precision of a perfectly calibrated machine. Every movement was deliberate and practiced, reflecting hundreds of hours of drill preparation that had prepared him for this moment. His white gloves caught the sunlight as his hand moved through the prescribed arc, creating a visual display that demonstrated the artistry inherent in military precision. Wellington's training dictated that he should not respond to gestures or movements from members of the public, but the protocols governing interactions with foreign military personnel were more complex and nuanced. The British soldier found himself in uncharted territory, required to balance his duty to remain motionless with the ceremonial requirements of acknowledging a visiting Allied serviceman. His decades of experience told him that this moment required a level of judgment that went beyond the simple application of written regulations. A military attaché from the American embassy watched nervously from the sidelines, aware that this interaction was being recorded by numerous cameras and would likely be scrutinized by officials from both nations. The diplomatic implications of the ceremony had been carefully considered during the planning stages, but the reality of the moment carried an intensity that no amount of preparation could fully anticipate. The crowd's silence became so complete that individual sounds began to stand out with startling clarity: the distant rumble of London traffic, the rustle of clothing as people shifted for better views, and the steady rhythm of both soldiers' breathing created an acoustic backdrop that heightened the drama of the unfolding scene. Children in the Hawaiis crowd stopped their usual chatter, sensing the gravity of what they were witnessing even if they didn't fully understand its significance. Rodriguez completed his salute and held the position, waiting for the prescribed response that would complete the ceremonial exchange. The Marine's expression remained professional and composed, but those watching closely could detect the slight tension around his eyes that revealed the pressure he was experiencing. This was not a combat situation where his training provided clear guidelines for action, but a delicate diplomatic moment that required perfect execution. Wellington felt the weight of tradition pressing down upon him like a physical force. Generations of guardsmen had stood at this same post, maintaining the same unwavering discipline that had become synonymous with British military excellence. The decision he made in the next few seconds would either honor that legacy or potentially create an international incident that could strain the carefully maintained relationship between Allied forces. The Royal Guard's fingers twitched almost imperceptibly, the only outward sign of the internal struggle taking place behind his stoic facade. His training warred with his instinct to acknowledge the respect being shown by a fellow soldier, creating a moment of profound tension that seemed to stretch endlessly under the watchful eyes of the assembled crowd. Camera shutters clicked furiously as photographers captured every nuance of the interaction, understanding that they were documenting a moment that would likely become part of military folklore. The images being created would be analyzed and discussed in military academies and diplomatic circles, serving as either an example of perfect ceremonial execution or a cautionary tale about the complexities of international military protocol. The tension reached a crescendo as Wellington made his choice, slowly and deliberately beginning to raise his right hand in acknowledgement of Rodriguez's salute. The movement was so gradual that it seemed to occur in slow motion, each inch of progress drawing gasps from the crowd who understood they were witnessing something extraordinary. The Queen's Guard was breaking with centuries of tradition, choosing to honor a fellow soldier over the rigid protocols that had defined his service. Rodriguez felt a wave of relief and respect wash over him as he recognized the courage required for Wellington's decision. The British soldier was risking his career and reputation by deviating from established procedures, but he was doing so out of respect for the shared bond that existed between professional soldiers regardless of nationality. The Marine maintained his salute with renewed pride, understanding that this moment was transforming from a simple ceremonial exchange into something far more meaningful. The crowd erupted in spontaneous applause as Wellington's hand reached the proper position, completing a mutual salute that bridged not only the distance between the two soldiers, but also the cultural and procedural differences that separated their respective services. Phones continued to record as spectators realized they were witnessing a moment of pure human connection that transcended military regulations and diplomatic protocols. British military officials watching from nearby felt their hearts sink as they witnessed what appeared to be a serious breach of Queen's Guard protocols. The regulations governing the behavior of guards on duty were clear and unambiguous, leaving no room for personal interpretation or deviation from established procedures. Wellington's actions, however well-intentioned, could result in disciplinary action and potentially end his career in the prestigious unit. American dignitaries, meanwhile, felt a surge of pride as they watched their representative handle the delicate situation with such professionalism and respect. Rodriguez's conduct reflected the highest ideals of American military service, demonstrating the values of honor and mutual respect that the Marine Corps had instilled in him through years of rigorous training and deployment experience. The two soldiers held their salute for exactly the prescribed duration, neither man showing any sign of the internal turmoil that had preceded this moment. Their eyes met briefly during the exchange, and in that instant, they communicated volumes about duty, respect, and the shared experiences that bound military personnel together across all national boundaries. It was a moment of pure understanding between warriors who had dedicated their lives to serving causes greater than themselves. As the salute concluded, both men returned to their respective positions with the same mechanical precision that had marked the beginning of their interaction. Rodriguez stepped back the prescribed distance and executed a perfect about-face before beginning his march back across the parade ground. Wellington resumed his motionless vigil, his face betraying nothing of the momentous decision he had just made. The crowd began to disperse slowly, many spectators lingering to discuss what they had witnessed and to share photos and videos of the unprecedented interaction. Social media platforms immediately began buzzing with posts about the encounter, with hashtags and captions attempting to capture the significance of what had occurred. The story spread rapidly across digital networks, reaching audiences far beyond those who had been physically present. Military historians in the crowd recognized the historical significance of the moment, understanding that they had witnessed something that would likely be studied and debated for years to come. The interaction represented a perfect example of how individual judgment and human decency could sometimes transcend rigid institutional requirements, creating moments of genuine connection in an increasingly divided world. Young soldiers watching from the periphery of the crowd felt inspired by what they had seen, recognizing in the actions of both men the highest ideals of military service. The encounter demonstrated that true professionalism sometimes required the courage to make difficult decisions that went beyond simple rule following, requiring instead a deeper understanding of the principles that underlay those rules. The immediate aftermath of the salute exchange was marked by an electric atmosphere as people began to process what they had witnessed. Conversations broke out spontaneously as strangers turned to one another to share their reactions and interpretations of the events. The simple act of mutual respect between two soldiers had created a moment of unity among the diverse crowd that had gathered to watch. Security personnel moved through the area with increased vigilance, aware that the unprecedented nature of the interaction might attract additional attention and potentially create crowd control challenges. The smooth execution of the ceremonial exchange had avoided any immediate diplomatic complications, but the long-term ramifications remained to be seen as word of the event spread through official channels. Within minutes of the encounter, Videos of the extraordinary salute exchange began appearing on social media platforms around the world. The footage captured every detail of the interaction, from Rodriguez's measured approach to Wellington's momentous decision to break protocol. Comments poured in from viewers who recognized the significance of what they were watching, with many praising both soldiers for their professionalism and mutual respect. British military command received urgent reports about the incident within the hour, as protocol officers scrambled to assess the potential ramifications of Wellington's actions. The Queen's Guard regulations were explicit about maintaining absolute stillness during duty hours, and any deviation from these standards traditionally resulted in immediate disciplinary action. However, the unique circumstances of the international ceremonial exchange created a complex situation that required careful consideration. Rodriguez completed his ceremonial duties and was immediately approached by his commanding officer, who had witnessed the entire exchange from a nearby observation post. The American colonel's expression was unreadable as he gestured for the Marine to accompany him to a private briefing area where they could discuss what had occurred without the scrutiny of the assembled crowd and media representatives. Meanwhile, Wellington continued his guard duty as if nothing unusual had happened, maintaining the same perfect stillness that had characterized his service for over 3 years. Internally, however, he was acutely aware that his career might have been irrevocably changed by his split-second decision to honor a fellow soldier. The weight of potential consequences pressed down upon him, but he felt no regret for choosing respect over rigid adherence to regulations. News organizations picked up the story with remarkable speed, recognizing the human interest appeal of the unprecedented military encounter. Reporters began reaching out to military experts and protocol specialists to provide context for what viewers were seeing in the rapidly spreading videos. The story had all the elements that modern audiences craved: tradition, respect, courage, and the kind of authentic, human moment that felt increasingly rare in an overstaged world. The American Embassy in London received dozens of phone calls from journalists seeking official comment on the incident and its implications for British-American military relations. Diplomatic staff found themselves in the unusual position of having to craft responses about a spontaneous moment that had not been anticipated in any of their carefully prepared talking points or crisis management protocols. British veterans watching the coverage felt a complex mix of emotions as they witnessed one of their own making a decision that honored the spirit of military service while potentially violating its letter. Many understood the impossible position Wellington had found himself in, forced to choose between competing loyalties and values in a matter of seconds while under intense public scrutiny. Social media analysis showed that public reaction was overwhelmingly positive, with viewers from around the world praising both soldiers for their dignity and professionalism. The story resonated particularly strongly with military families and veterans who understood the significance of the mutual respect demonstrated by the two men. Hashtag celebrating the encounter began trending in multiple countries, creating a global conversation about military tradition and human decency. Pentagon officials monitored the developing story with interest, recognizing that Rodriguez's conduct reflected positively on American military training and values. The Marines' respectful approach and professional demeanor throughout the encounter demonstrated the kind of cultural sensitivity and diplomatic awareness that the military worked hard to instill in its personnel serving in international assignments. Wellington's immediate superior officers faced their own difficult decisions as they watched the story unfold in real time. The unprecedented nature of the situation meant that there was no clear precedent for how to respond to a guard who had broken protocol for reasons of military courtesy and international diplomacy. The decision would likely need to be escalated through multiple levels of command before any official action could be taken. The crowd that had witnessed the original encounter began to disperse, but many lingered in small groups to continue discussing what they had seen. Tourists who had stumbled upon the moment by chance found themselves part of a story that would be shared and retold for years to come. The spontaneous nature of the event had created something more authentic and meaningful than any carefully choreographed ceremony could have achieved. Military protocol experts began analyzing the footage frame by frame, examining the precise execution of both soldiers' movements and the implications of Wellington's decision to acknowledge the American salute. The technical proficiency displayed by both men was undeniable, but the larger questions about appropriate responses to unprecedented situations remained open for debate and interpretation. High-ranking officials from both the British and American military establishments convened emergency meetings to address the unprecedented situation that had unfolded at Buckingham Palace. The conference rooms buzzed with intense discussions, as generals, colonels, and diplomatic attachés attempted to navigate the complex implications of what had become an international incident with far-reaching consequences for military protocol and diplomatic relations. Wellington was quietly relieved of his guard duty 2 hours ahead of schedule and escorted to a private meeting with his regimental commander. The walk through the palace corridors felt endless as he contemplated the potential end of a military career that had defined his entire adult life. His family's proud tradition of service to the crown might end with his decision to honor an American Marine, but he remained convinced that he had made the right choice under impossible circumstances. Rodriguez found himself in a similar situation, called before a panel of senior American military officers who needed to understand exactly what had occurred and why. The Marine recounted the events with precise detail, explaining his adherence to the ceremonial protocols as they had been briefed to him while acknowledging the unexpected nature of Wellington's response. His superiors recognized that he had handled the situation with exemplary professionalism throughout. The media storm intensified throughout the afternoon as news outlets around the world picked up the story of the soldiers who had created a moment of international unity through simple human respect. Editorial writers and commentators began crafting pieces that used the incident as a lens through which to examine larger questions about military tradition, international cooperation, and the balance between rules and humanity. Public opinion polls conducted by major news organizations showed overwhelming support for both soldiers, with respondents praising their professionalism and the respect they had shown for each other despite the potential consequences. The story had struck a chord with audiences who saw in their actions a reminder of the values and principles that military service was meant to embody and protect. Senior diplomatic officials recognized that the incident presented both challenges and opportunities for British-American relations. While the breach of protocol was concerning from a purely regulatory standpoint, the genuine respect and professionalism displayed by both soldiers had created positive international attention and demonstrated the strong bonds between Allied forces in a way that no formal ceremony could have achieved. Wellington's commanding officer found himself in an unprecedented situation, required to balance strict military discipline with recognition of the extraordinary circumstances that had led to the protocol violation. The Queen's Guard traditions were sacred, but the respect shown by an Allied soldier had created a situation that demanded careful consideration rather than automatic punishment according to standard procedures. Military law experts were consulted to provide guidance on how to handle a situation that fell outside the normal parameters of disciplinary action. The unique nature of the incident meant that standard protocols for handling breaches of guard duty were insufficient to address the complex diplomatic and ceremonial elements that had contributed to Wellington's decision. International military academies began incorporating the incident into their curriculum as a case study in leadership decision-making under pressure. The split-second choice made by Wellington became a teaching tool for examining how soldiers should respond when competing values and responsibilities create ethical dilemmas that cannot be resolved through simple rule following. Rodriguez received notification that his actions had been reviewed favorably by his chain of command, with officials noting that his conduct throughout the encounter had reflected the highest standards of Marine Corps professionalism. The commendation he received acknowledged not only his technical precision during the ceremonial exchange, but also his diplomatic sensitivity in handling an unprecedented situation. The story continued to evolve as journalists uncovered additional details about both soldiers' backgrounds and service records. Wellington's exemplary record as a guardsman and Rodriguez's distinguished combat service added depth to the narrative, helping audiences understand that this was not simply a moment of rebellion against authority, but a decision made by proven professionals who understood the weight of their actions. Legal scholars specializing in military justice began debating the precedent that the incident might establish for future cases involving protocol violations committed for reasons of international courtesy or diplomatic necessity. The unique circumstances of the case challenged traditional approaches to military discipline while highlighting the importance of individual judgment in complex situations. Both soldiers spent restless hours waiting to learn their fate as their respective military hierarchies worked through the implications of their actions. The uncertainty was particularly difficult for Wellington, who faced the possibility of losing not only his position but also his place in a family tradition that stretched back through generations of military service to the crown. The breakthrough came during a secure video conference between the highest levels of British and American military command, where senior officers from both nations worked together to find a resolution that would honor military tradition while recognizing the extraordinary circumstances of the incident. The solution they developed would require unprecedented cooperation and creativity to maintain the integrity of both military establishments while addressing the global attention the story had attracted. Wellington received word that he was being summoned to an urgent meeting with officials from multiple levels of command, including representatives from the Ministry of Defense who rarely involve themselves in individual disciplinary matters. The gravity of the situation was evident in the elaborate security measures surrounding the meeting, suggesting that decisions made would have implications far beyond his personal military career. Rodriguez learned that his case had been elevated to senior Pentagon officials, who were working in coordination with their British counterparts to address the international dimensions of the incident. The American military leadership recognized that the resolution of Wellington's situation would significantly impact diplomatic relations and set important precedents for future military cooperation between allied nations. Media attention intensified as news leaked that high-level discussions were taking place to address the incident. Speculation ran rampant about potential outcomes, with military experts offering conflicting predictions about whether the soldiers would face punishment or commendation for their actions. The story had captured global imagination in a way that surprised even experienced media observers. Behind closed doors, military historians were consulted to research similar incidents in the past and examine how previous generations had handled situations where individual initiative conflicted with established protocols. The research revealed that military excellence had often required the kind of judgment and courage that both soldiers had demonstrated, though rarely under such intense public scrutiny. The solution that emerged from the high-level discussions was both innovative and respectful of military tradition. Rather than focusing solely on the protocol violation, officials chose to recognize the incident as an example of the professional excellence and international cooperation that both military organizations sought to promote. The decision represented a victory for human judgment over rigid bureaucracy. Wellington was informed that instead of facing disciplinary action, he would be recognized for his diplomatic sensitivity and professional judgment in handling an unprecedented situation. The commendation acknowledged that his decision to return the American salute had strengthened international military relationships and demonstrated the values that the Queen's Guard was meant to embody and protect. The official announcement was carefully crafted to address both the protocol concerns and the positive international reaction to the incident. Military officials emphasized that while strict adherence to regulations remained essential, the unique circumstances of international ceremonial exchanges required the kind of professional judgment that both soldiers had demonstrated throughout their careers. Rodriguez received notification that he would be awarded a special recognition for his role in strengthening British-American military relations through his professional conduct during the ceremonial exchange. The award acknowledged not only his technical proficiency but also his contribution to a moment that had showcased the best aspects of military cooperation between allied nations. The joint statement released by both military establishments praised the soldiers for their professionalism and emphasized the importance of the strong relationships that existed between American and British forces. The incident was reframed as an example of successful international military cooperation, rather than a protocol violation requiring disciplinary action. Public reaction to the resolution was overwhelmingly positive, with veterans organizations and military families expressing satisfaction that both soldiers had been recognized rather than punished for their actions. The outcome reinforced public faith in military leadership and demonstrated that common sense and human decency could prevail even within the most tradition-bound institutions. Military academies began developing new curriculum materials based on the incident, using it as a case study for teaching future officers about leadership, international cooperation, and the importance of individual judgment in complex situations. The story became a powerful tool for illustrating how true military excellence required both strict discipline and the wisdom to know when circumstances demanded flexibility. The resolution also established new protocols for handling similar situations in the future, providing clear guidance for soldiers who might find themselves in comparable circumstances. The guidelines acknowledged that international ceremonial duties sometimes required adaptations of traditional procedures while maintaining the essential elements that made military traditions meaningful and effective. International military observers noted that the handling of the incident had strengthened rather than weakened military relationships between the two nations. The willingness of both military establishments to work together to find a positive resolution demonstrated the maturity and professionalism that characterized the best aspects of military cooperation between democratic allies. 6 months after the incident at Buckingham Palace, Wellington and Rodriguez found themselves reunited at a special ceremony designed to celebrate international military cooperation and the bonds that connected professional soldiers across national boundaries. The event, held at the Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst, brought together military personnel from allied nations to commemorate the values of respect, honor, and mutual support that had been so powerfully demonstrated during their spontaneous exchange. The ceremony featured both soldiers as honored guests, their presence serving as a living reminder of how individual acts of respect and professional judgment could transcend political boundaries and bureaucratic constraints. Wellington had been promoted and assigned to a prestigious position within the ceremonial division, his career enhanced rather than damaged by his decision to honor an allied soldier. Rodriguez had completed his tour of duty and returned to the United States, where he continued to serve with distinction while frequently speaking about his experience at international military forums. The footage of their original encounter had been viewed millions of times across various platforms, becoming one of the most widely shared examples of military professionalism and international respect in digital history. The video had been translated into dozens of languages and was regularly shown at military training facilities around the world as an example of how soldiers should conduct themselves when representing their nations abroad. Educational institutions had embraced the story as a powerful teaching tool for courses on leadership, international relations, and ethical decision-making under pressure. Business schools used it to illustrate principles of professional conduct and cross-cultural communication, while military academies incorporated it into their curriculum as a case study in leadership that transcended traditional rule following. Both soldiers had received numerous invitations to speak at conferences and events, sharing their perspectives on the incident and its aftermath. Their presentations consistently emphasized the importance of mutual respect between allied forces and the role that individual soldiers played in maintaining international relationships through their daily conduct and professional behavior. The incident had prompted a comprehensive review of ceremonial protocols by military establishments around the world, resulting in updated guidelines that provided clearer direction for soldiers facing similar situations. The new protocols acknowledged that international military cooperation sometimes required adaptations of traditional procedures while maintaining the essential dignity and respect that made military ceremonies meaningful. Wellington continued his service with the Queen's Guard, now recognized as an expert on international ceremonial procedures and frequently called upon to help train soldiers who would represent Britain in international exchanges. His experience had transformed him from a traditional guardsman into a specialist in diplomatic military interactions, opening career opportunities that had not existed before his moment of decision at Buckingham Palace. Rodriguez had been selected for advanced leadership training and was being prepared for increasingly responsible positions within the Marine Corps. His conduct during the incident had been noted in his service record as an example of the diplomatic skills and cultural sensitivity that modern military leaders needed to possess in an increasingly interconnected world. The friendship that had developed between the two soldiers had become a symbol of international military cooperation, with their continued correspondence and mutual respect serving as an ongoing reminder of the bonds that connected professional soldiers, regardless of nationality. They regularly exchanged perspectives on military service and the challenges of maintaining traditional values in a rapidly changing world. Museums and military history centers had acquired artifacts and documentation related to the incident, preserving it as part of the historical record of military cooperation between allied nations. The story had entered the realm of military folklore, passed down through training programs and informal discussions among soldiers who saw in it an inspiring example of professional excellence. The long-term impact of their actions extended far beyond their individual careers, influencing military training programs and international cooperation protocols in ways that would affect countless future soldiers. Their moment of mutual respect had created ripple effects throughout military establishments, reinforcing the importance of human judgment and professional courtesy in all military interactions. As they stood together during the commemorative ceremony, both soldiers reflected on how a split-second decision made under intense pressure had transformed not only their own lives, but had also contributed to a broader understanding of what military professionalism meant in the modern world. Their story continued to inspire new generations of soldiers who learned that true military excellence required not only strict discipline, but also the wisdom and courage to make the right choice when circumstances demanded it. The legacy of their encounter lived on in the countless soldiers who had been influenced by their example, carrying forward the values of respect, honor, and international cooperation that they had so powerfully demonstrated during those silent moments at Buckingham Palace when the world watched two warriors choose humanity over rigid protocol.